And we're live, so I'm going to go ahead and wait for some people to arrive and let me know how the sound is. In the meantime, let me go ahead and pull up the suggestions that we did get for this month. And once again, when somebody joins the stream and they can hear me, just please let me know that you can hear me, that the sound is good. Just want to make sure I don't need to adjust anything. Okay, perfect. Everything's looking good on my end so far. And how's the sound? Can anybody confirm that the sound is good? My webcam keeps adjusting the image. All right, so it looks like we have a couple people. So once again, hello. Hello, Sky. Can you hear me? How's the audio? Sound is good. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to be doing in this stream is we're going to be picking out the nominees for our November Coffee of the Month. So I do have a couple of ideas up to this point, but as always, we're going to go through all the suggestions that we do have on Instagram. And if you guys want to contribute any additional suggestions or recommendations, then feel free to do so. But for right now, let's go ahead and jump into it. And the first thing I'm actually going to say before we start discussing the Instagram suggestions is I wanted to carry over something from last month's suggestions because I really liked last month's suggestion of non-traditional geisha offerings. So these are geishas from origins that aren't necessarily the most common, so like Honduran geishas or El Salvadorian geishas. I wanted to see if we could find some of those because it was really interesting to see just how many we found last month. And if we can continue with that theme this month, then it's something that I would like to explore. But outside of that, let's go ahead and get started with this month's suggestions. And the first one we had was from Kevin VHI, and they suggested Guatemalan, Honduran, or El Salvadorian coffees. And that's actually why I wanted to start with discussing the geishas, is because we could actually go with this theme if we do find geishas with these origins. So I don't have anything off the top of my head, but we'll go ahead and actually get started. Let me share the screen here. Okay. And I know it usually takes a little bit to get that going. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so one coffee roaster that I feel like was a good suggestion was actually, what is it, Bean and Bean? The one that Brian continuously visits in New York because, let's see here. Is that what it's called? In There we go. Yeah, Bean and Bean Coffee Roastery in New York. Because when he was doing one of the live streams, they found a couple. Well, they were cupping one of the Honduran geishas, I believe. So since they're a coffee roaster that we haven't necessarily reviewed up to this point, and one I don't have any familiarity with, and that's actually a really good place to start right here. So it is a little expensive. It is at $58, but as mentioned, it's a good place to at least start when discussing non-traditional geisha offerings. And the person that was on that live stream with Brian, I think her name is Jiyun. She was a really big fan. This was their favorite coffee on the table as well. It's only 4 ounces, so that makes things even more tricky. But I'll keep this kind of in the back of my mind. As mentioned, it is an option if we do go with that theme. So that's the first thing that we did have in mind. But outside of that, Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador. So if there's any other coffee roaster that has one of those origins right now, that's really exciting. That would be greatly appreciated. But for right now, we'll keep that in the back of our mind and move on to, let's see here. Kashal K24 says, Jimmy Bean's Coffee Club in Chicago, H&S-esque drum roasted light roasts. And I believe, if I have this correctly, they were recently one of the coffee roasters that was in the Mystery Coffee League. And I could have that wrong, but let's see here. I remember looking at their website at one point, but I didn't look too deep, mostly because I hadn't heard too much about them as of that moment. Well, we'll take a look at what they're currently offering on their website. So we have some Ethiopian coffees, of course, and let's see here what else we got. Okay, so mostly a bunch of Ethiopian coffees as of this moment. So that makes things a little tricky. I'm not sure if we're going to go with an Ethiopian theme this month. Is that really everything that they're offering right now? Yeah, it just said 6 products, and it looks like every single one of them is going to be some sort of Ethiopian offering. So I'll keep them in mind for the future, but I think right now I'm looking for something probably different than just Ethiopian, mostly because we have so many Ethiopian coffees in the works and ones that we're reviewing. So, yeah, we'll see on that. And hello, Kevin. Nice to have you join us on this stream. And that reminds me, I am drinking the Ngise Gameta from Claremento, which I know it's out of Korea. I can't remember if they're the ones that aren't out of Seoul, but I think that they're out of Seoul as well. Jacob from Airworks gave me a sample of this when I met up with him last. And this is the same coffee that we had from Wes and Gopi, a sample of earlier this year as well, which is my favorite natural processed coffee. So I was curious to try out their version. I don't necessarily think it's quite as good. It's a little less clean, but I figured since I just had a sample, we were going to try that coffee for this stream. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next suggestion. So we had from the Filter Coffee, and they said Florida-based roasters. So I only know of a couple, and one of which actually reached out to us this month, and it's Bold Bean. So that's the one I believe. They're a coffee roaster that we featured on the channel a long time ago, actually, and it was just sort of a blind taste test, mostly because my friend Kyle gave me some samples of their coffees. But they're a coffee roaster that we could go back and visit. Now, I'm hoping that they do have something that's a higher end offering. Let's see here. They have a single origin flight, which is something that we might consider exploring in the future. Let's see here. Outside of that, looks like some Kenyan coffees, some Ethiopian coffees, and yeah, nothing on the higher end side of things. They did mention this Julian Calderon, and it sounds very heavy based off of the description, but it's a coffee that I might have. Well, I'll probably purchase if we do end up going with them for whatever reason, mostly because I had only one coffee from Julian Calderon, and it wasn't necessarily my favorite. A Matter of Concrete's version of a Julian Calderon coffee. All right. What else do we have? I know Panther. Panther once upon a time was a very notable coffee roaster out in I want to say Miami. So I'm going to take a very quick look at what they're currently offering as well. So far, we don't necessarily have too many things to go along with our theme yet, but we do have some really great suggestions this month. So I wanted to thank you guys because there are a lot of things that I'm looking forward to looking at and discussing within this live stream, mostly because there were just some really nice ideas. All right, so Panther, let's see here what we have from them. It looks like a lot of blends right now, mostly blends. I'm wondering if we can sort through single origin. And if anybody has any other, this is Tanzanian coffee. If anybody has any other suggestions for Florida-based coffee roasters, then I'd love to know. But those are the only two I think that come to mind off the top of my head when looking at that. But this one right here, being a Kent and N39, it doesn't go along with the Gesha theme, but it's still a pretty nice coffee given that it is a Tanzanian coffee. So if we do go with that theme, I think the issue with that is I just don't have too many Florida-based coffee roasters to really pick from. Right. Let's move on. And the filter coffee also suggested underappreciated origins. And I'm wondering if there's a way to go to the let's see here. I know they recently did a write-up about underappreciated origins, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to Google that without going directly through their information. Let's because I want to pull up their article. We were quoted in that article actually, and it's a discussion of some underappreciated origins. That's not it. We were part of that discussion with them. It was actually our review of the Bolivian geisha from Luminous a couple of years ago that inspired them to write that article. And a lot of people highlighted origins like Rwandan, and we highlighted origins like Bolivia. And it's a good option to go with, especially given that we've already kind of discussed going with some of the Guatemalan, Honduran, El Salvadorian coffees, as well as if we can find them in Gesha varietals. So that'll be interesting to go with. And John says, producer roasters as a theme. Okay, that's actually a very interesting theme. And I really like that suggestion, John, because the one that obviously comes to mind is Instinto from Pepe. And then in addition to that, we still have those, what is it? I don't want to get the Savage coffees. So those are two producer coffee roasters, and I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head right now. But if you do have any others, then that would be greatly appreciated. So let's see here, Kevin. Let's see here. And I don't know your name. It looks yeah, I don't wanna guess the characters, but hi back. Um, John says Savage is Florida-based. That's right. So that actually does kind of fit with the Florida theme, and it also does fit with the producer theme. Kevin says, "Would love to see some Guatemalan, Honduran, or El Salvadorian coffees." Yeah, Kevin, that was the first thing we mentioned. You were the first comments that we did have. So I took a look, and if you have any coffee roasters that you would suggest that have those coffees, then that'd be great. And Clement21 says, Clatch has an El Salvadorian Gesha. That's perfect. That goes in line with everything that I'm actually looking for right now. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And I do want to revisit Clatch because we've only had one review of their coffee, and it was coffee that I would say wasn't even necessarily my own preference. So it'd be great to kind of revisit them and give them a second opportunity here. Right. So we do have a couple of El Salvadorian coffees. They're actually relatively cheap. So I'm wondering if any of them are the ones that we're supposed to be looking for, actually. Vegan advised, which one of the El Salvadorian ones is it? And then they do have this Gesha coffee trio set. So I'm going to take a very quick look at this. Which coffees are featured? So we have El Thierry Chombi, and we have a couple of Panamanian coffees. So we're going to probably skip Panama as part of the theme for that, especially since we've done a Panamanian theme. But this is one option, so I do appreciate that option. Let's see here. Kevin says, I think Bean and Bean has two interesting. That's the other one that we discussed first was actually Bean and Bean because I did see that Honduran Gesha on Brian's stream, and that was an option. It's pretty steep. I wanted to say it was 56 plus dollars for 4 ounces. So I don't know if a lot of people would be able to purchase that coffee given the price, but it is one that also fits in our theme, so we kind of have 2 coffees that do go within this theme as of this moment. Not familiar with their roast style, and based off of what I've heard, because a lot of people have tried it given that Brian's been so, supportive of the business, it sounds like they do roast a little lighter, and it was tricky for Brian to tell when it was on a cupping table with a bunch of, say well, I wanna say one say coffee, so I think that probably speaks a little bit to the roast style, roast profile of their coffees, but it's something that we'll revisit. Katerina says, "Are you doing an advent calendar this year?" And yes, we are. So we are doing the Cafe Box advent calendar, and I wonder if we can actually pull up real quick since we're discussing it. The Cafe Box advent calendar. We'll go to their Instagram actually because I know it's on their Instagram. The coffee roasters that are going to be featured in this month's advent calendar because as mentioned, it's not a lot of coffee roasters that we have familiarity with, but for that reason, I'm actually a little excited. So we've had Cafe Raven before, we've had Langora before, we've had Jakku, we've had Coffee Collective, obviously. We've had Sydney Fjord, and this one right here, Mjosen, I don't think we've had before. Kaffa, I was a huge fan of Kaffa when we did have Kaffa, but that was back when they were still roasting on the Probat. So I don't well, currently they're roasting on the Loring, so I have not had any of their coffees since they transitioned over to the Loring, mostly because 'cause they're not the easiest coffee roaster to get outside of Cafe Box in the United States, so that's an interesting one right there. Fuglin, and we had them in last year's Cafe Box advent calendar, and we also had them in Tokyo because they have a shop in Tokyo. Gringo, I've heard a fair bit about recently, and I've never tried them, so that's gonna be an interesting one. Standout, we've had a fair bit of Standout. I purchased an entire set of their coffees and had mostly mixed reactions to those. They do tend to skew on the very experimental out there side of things. Cafe Roastery, I think that they were featured in one of the previous advent calendars. And then Ostrat, they are a coffee roaster I'd never heard of. So a couple of new ones here. Unfortunately, no Cofea Circular, no Tim Wendelboe. I think that there's another notable coffee roaster that's usually in these advent calendars that's missing this year, but still some pretty interesting ones. So I'm looking forward to those. Let's see here. Mohammed says Archer's Coffee and April Coffee Roasters have Guatemalan geishas. I'm wondering how expensive that Guatemalan geisha from April is going to be. Now, the only reason I'm not looking too deeply into Archers is because we have a bunch of Archers reviews that are actually coming up. So we'll take a look at the April geisha right now, and I'm gonna guess it's probably a little bit on the more expensive side of things. I'm gonna guess it's probably El Socorro. I think that's the geisha that they usually bring in. Yeah, El Socorro, Guatemala, and then oh, I don't. What is the conversion on that. But yes, right here we do have this. I feel like I've had this coffee in the past before. I think somebody brewed it for me one time. It is offered in 125 grams. So this is actually not a terrible option for us. So I think I will keep this in mind. I'm going to write this down because usually I do a pretty poor job of writing down what we have in mind. So Clatch had a geisha, and it was an El Salvadorian. And then we also now have this April, and it's the Guatemalan. And then I'll keep a Bean and Bean in mind, but as mentioned, it's a very expensive one, so I'm not entirely sure if we could do that. And Clem says it's under coffee Pearl Reserve. All right, let's go back to that then real quick. I assume it's probably going to be one of their single origin coffees. Coffee, see here, Pearl Reserve. There we go. And there are the geishas, it looks like. So it looks like an anaerobic natural 1995. So I'm wondering if that one's probably, we have two different ones. It's probably for a smaller size and 170-gram bags. That's actually not terrible. Both of which sound a little heavy, strawberry candy, but between the two, I'm wondering which of the El Salvadorians sound a little. I'm definitely going to go with this one mostly because this is just all red notes. So I'm going to guess that that one's probably much more heavy than this one. But yes, that does give us some options right there. So we have at least two ideas right now if we're going to go with this theme for non-traditional geishas and a couple of different coffee roasters on those as well. So that's pretty good so far. And then John says La Cabra has an El Salvadorian geisha. Let's take a look. Unfortunately, my La Cabra connection is no longer available, so I would probably need to purchase directly from them. But I don't think that their shipping is actually that expensive. And it's kind of interesting. I haven't looked at their website in a while, but it's interesting that they have a United States and rest of the world option. Oh, okay, there we go. I'll write this down too, because that's an interesting option. And it seems like a lot of the non-traditional origins do really like to go on the more experimental side of things with the processing of their coffees. So we'll write down La Cabra, and it's another El Salvadorian. Minmax has an El Socorro. Actually, ah, that's tricky. I'm gonna take a look at it. And the tricky thing about doing Minmax is we've already featured Minmax as a Coffee of the Month coffee roaster this year, and I'm not sure that we can do it in such a short amount of time, given it was just actually a couple of months ago. But that's actually great. I would love to get theirs. I think that they would also probably win any poll that we do have because just like say they performed exceptionally well in the poll that they were featured in. Yeah, look at that, El Socorro. Uh, much let's see here. So I need to purchase at least I could probably get away with yeah, usually purchasing 2 bags. We could probably yeah, we purchase 2 bags of that. So that's actually not terrible in terms of the price. A little bit of funk listed by Brian there, but what is the processing? It's a washed. Kind of interesting description for this coffee being that it is a washed, but yeah, that would I would normally write this down and make it an option. But given that MinMax has featured recently as one of our coffee of the months, I don't think I can do it so soon after. But I would personally like to try this. So hopefully somebody I know actually gets a sample and they would actually be able to provide me with a sample of that. And let's see what we've got. So Kevin says Apollon's Gold has a Honduran Gesha. That's actually a good shout out. So I have not had Apollon's Gold since that review. The was it a Rwandan? The Rwandan review that we got the coffee from Airworks. So let's take a look at what they're currently offering. And I would love to revisit them because I've heard a lot of mixed things about their profile since that review. Oh, it's El Triangular. This is okay. I'm going to make this one an absolute certainty if we are going with this theme because I've been wanting to try this coffee for a very, very long time and I've never had the opportunity. It's also different from the Guatemalan and the El Salvadorian offerings that we do have on this list as well. So this is actually a great option right here. And it looks like it's probably going to be a little expensive. Not sure what the, it's actually just, yeah, so about, what is that, $60 or so. But as mentioned, it's a coffee that I've wanted to try for a very, very long time. And let's see here. Aaron says there's a Kona Gesha at Olympian anaerobic though. Let's take a look at that one. There was a coffee roaster in California last month that also had a Hawaiian geisha, and I can't remember which one that one was, but we'll take a look at Olympia, and that would actually be very easy for me to get. I remember them having it in the past, and I remember it being pretty expensive, so I'm wondering if it's still going to be a bit expensive. How big is the bag of this one? 6 ounces? That's actually not terrible. I wonder how this coffee would turn out. I'm very familiar with Olympia and their profile being a little bit more on the developed side of things, but I'm going to bookmark this one down as well. Worst case scenario, we'll do another runoff on our Instagram poll to narrow it down. And this is why I really like this theme. There's so many really good ideas for non-traditional geishas out there, so we've already come up with a really good list. John says La Cabra roasts in New York City now, and I've been wondering when they were going to officially start roasting in New York City because their coffees for a number of years now have tasted a little different than they used to in the past. So I don't think it's too surprising that they finally started roasting there, but as mentioned, it's just been a little different. Weston Gopi has a Costa Rican and a Guatemalan geisha. So good idea, Mohammed. Let me go ahead and pull up Weston Gopi. I think we actually picked up one of those coffees. We recently purchased quite a few of Weston Gopi's coffees again because they released a number of coffees, and I think that that was one of them. Otherwise, I would also give Weston Gopi consideration, but it's been funny. Some of the coffee roasters you've suggested are coffees that we're already working on, or coffee roasters we're already working on. Well, let's take a look here. So yeah, we have some Colombian geishas. Can't gotta stay away from that. Costa Rican geisha. Is this one the new one? I think this is one that we actually picked up. And what else do we have? I'll kind of run through what I remember us picking up, and they were all newer coffees. If we could find a Bolivian geisha, that would actually be wonderful. I would love to kind of go with that as part of the underappreciated origins theme, since I think it's one of the most underappreciated origins. I think this is we definitely picked up Bergwu, and I believe this is the natural that we picked up from them. The Buna Amrach, and then we picked up the Kenyan coffee that they currently have, this one right here, and I wanna say it was I guess it's gone now. They had oh, no, there it is. The, Catalina Gesha. This is a very exciting sounding coffee for me. It is Armoire, so I was very excited to pick this one up, and, a lot of people were really surprised at how cheap it was to get this coffee specifically. Alright. Let's see what we have next. Michael says, ligature and lineage are Florida. That's right. So I completely forgot about those coffee roasters. Let's take a look at lineage first because I have familiarity with them. It's been a while since I've had one of their coffees, so. Oh, a Guatemalan SL28 under different circumstances. That would be a very interesting coffee that I would love to review. If they do have an interesting Gesha, then it would be fun to put that in our list because it would give me an opportunity to try that coffee. That's a very interesting coffee. I can't remember if, Lineage is on our suggestion recommendation list. I don't think that they are. I'm gonna quick look at that. They are. I might just, place that order because of how interesting that coffee is, but we'll go back. Okay. So no Geshas right here. This would go with the Florida theme, but this coffee right here is it a more processed coffee? It's a washed coffee. Okay, this is a very interesting coffee. I'm not sure what their minimum shipping is. I'm gonna write this down for myself to revisit because I might be interested in purchasing this coffee myself. And Michael also suggested ligature, so let's take a look at them. They're a coffee roaster I've actually never heard of before. And their bags look extremely similar to what is it, Bluebeard, the South African coffee roaster. And we got looks like only Colombian and Ethiopian coffees right now, assuming that this is all their coffees. I think it is. Okay, so it's good to know some additional Florida-based coffee roasters for right now, but that gives us an idea of what we're working with right now. So let's go ahead and move on. I think that this is probably the thing we're going to go with is those non-traditional geishas, given that we do have at least 5 suggestions so far, and we have all different origins as well. So we'll try to build off that, but let's move on to see what else we have. And Dennis N21 says Christmas specials from different roasteries. And I'm wondering if a lot of people might want to hold off on that until December because I know that a lot more coffee roasters will start to release those Christmas specials. The one that my friends always highlight and go back to is the Bear Claws from Kuma, which I've had before, but it's been well, we've never reviewed it. We've never reviewed any holiday themed coffee in the past that I can remember, specifically around this time of year. We've done some Halloween themed stuff in the past, but not something like this. So this might be a good option for December. As of right now, though, I think we're probably sticking a little bit more with the Gesha theme. And I'm not sure what other coffee roasters are offering these sort of coffees, but I will keep an eye out for it. So that way, next month when we do this stream, we can revisit that and see which ones might be a good idea or option for it. All right. Francisco GTZ17 says flower child coffee, and I would be really surprised right now if they had an obscure Gesha offering, but I specifically waited to check out their website until we did this stream, mostly because I have not looked at their website in a while, and I was curious to see what they were offering. I'm gonna take a sip of the coffee. A lot of Ethiopian offerings right now, a lot of Colombian offerings right now, and this is, I'd say, pretty consistent with what I usually see from them. So it's interesting and consistent. So this one right here is a Sidra. So that's the one I would say, Bourbon Rosado. These two coffees are both interesting, I would say. It's unfortunate that this Bourbon Rosado is also gone. I don't have a place now that brings in Flower Child as much as I used to. It used to be really easy for me to go and try a number of different Flower Child coffees, so it's unfortunate that we no longer have that option. This one's described as being hyper sweet, strawberry acidity. The coffees always sound really nice. Once again, it would just be great if there was a local supplier that continued to carry their coffees. But yeah, that's another option for right now. Let's go ahead and move on. And I do apologize for the sirens in the background, but let's see what else we have. And Zach said a redo of last month's. And I think the thing we went with last month was kind of candy themed coffees. So we'll take a look here and see, is there any other coffee roaster that had some candy themed coffees? I think a lot of the reason he suggested that was because we ended up finding a lot of interesting coffees that had these candy themes, especially specifically for Halloween. So I think the La Colina was one that had a very uh, candy themed description to it. Yeah, there we go. Candy corn. And then in addition to that, I know Manhattan had also dropped something, and then there's Swirl. So I'll kind of spoil this. We are reviewing the Nicaraguan coffee that had a candy cane note listed on here. I don't think that they still have it, but that was a coffee that also caught my interest. We are reviewing this Las Lajas from them, currently in the process of that. But yeah, let's go ahead and see what else we got. So RDI says, try another decaf. And that's an interesting discussion. I don't know if you guys want us to review another decaf so soon. I can't see us going with that theme given that it's already been a theme one time this year. I feel like maybe enough time has passed to try a decaf if you guys have some good suggestions for a decaf coffee in general. But as of right now, I don't think that we'd make it at least the theme for the coffee of the month for at least a while longer. Maybe next year we'll revisit it and do kind of a once a year sort of decaf coffee of the month. Though it had some pretty mixed impressions, and I don't even necessarily think our reviews of the decafs were particularly great. All right. Let's move on. And SKIBI695 says, Cafe for You, Santa Anita. And they were one of the better ones from the world of coffee in Copenhagen. So, yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at them. Never heard of them. It's actually with a C. Oh, they're from Slovakia. It actually said they said Santa Anita. Oh, it's probably the coffee, isn't it? All right. And my Slovakian is still not necessarily the best. Let's see here. 51 products. They have so many offerings right here. All right. Well, let's go to their limited offerings. I think I'm gonna have to take some time to probably go through this a little bit more thoroughly and see what they have because there's so many coffees that they're currently offering. Uh, well, I need to see if we can find that Santa Anita at least. Um, let's take a look at that. And it's not finding anything. I think that this should be our coffee right here. Carbonic macerated as N1 Costa Rican coffee. It's got a little bit of heaviness to it sounding. I think that this is a coffee roaster. I'm gonna write this one down too because I'm gonna probably take a much more extended look at them and see what else they're offering. I don't know where my pen went. Yeah, uh, I'm gonna take a look at them a little bit more thoroughly, mostly because they just have so many coffees. All right, let's see what else we have. And Coffee Wizard says Pacamara is great for autumn weather, and I agree with that. Some Pacamara coffees would be great, especially if there are some coffee roasters that we're working with in the future that are going to be offering them. I'm not sure of any Pacamaras that are worth looking at or visiting right now. If you guys have any Pacamaras you've seen recently that sound pretty exciting, I just haven't seen a lot of them. A lot of these suggestions we have are actually varietals. So in addition to that, the mood industry says pink for bones. And what I'm going to highlight is a coffee from Belaine, which we reviewed earlier this year. They recently brought it back, and it's a coffee that I would highly suggest for people that are interested in pink for bone coffees. It is this Johann Vergara, and shipping to United States can be a little expensive, but if you're in Europe, I think that shipping is probably going to be a bit cheaper. This coffee right here is still probably my favorite wash processed Colombian coffee that we've reviewed this year. It's extremely impressive. They describe it as tasting like a fancy Ethiopian coffee, and I could not agree more. This coffee was really impressive. It had such a peach forward components to it that it just honestly reminded me much more of an Ethiopian coffee. I still feel like if you would have put this on a table with a bunch of Ethiopian coffees, it would have been difficult to tell which one was which. But this was a really impressive coffee, and I know that, Airworks had a couple of them, but I think that they're completely out of these coffees right now. This is one that I would highly suggest, still one of my favorite coffees this year. And then Fondness says S&W de Bensa. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. And since we've been getting so many questions about S&W when we're releasing our Gala Morales review, I will let you guys know that it is going to be coming out Tuesday. Next week, we're going to release a video every single day so we can catch up once again. Because once again, I got myself backlogged on reviews. So the S&W one is one that a lot of people have asked about because they're going to be re-releasing the Gala Morales once we review it. So we're going to make sure that that's done as soon as possible, which is Tuesday. I actually expedited it to make sure that it would be reviewed in a sooner amount of time. And let's see here. And this is the coffee that they're referencing. I'm not sure yet if we do want to revisit S&W, mostly because we do have some S&W reviews coming out. That being said, I have had positive experiences with their more processed coffees up to this point, so this is an interesting one, pretty cheap. I know that's what people like to highlight about S&W is that they're good value a lot of the time for their coffees, but I will definitely keep an eye on this one. And John says Passenger has a Costa Rican Gesha. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if I've actually reviewed it. The biggest issue I've had with Passenger this year is that they haven't released too many new coffees that I haven't either tried or reviewed in the past. So it's been very difficult to review a lot of their coffees. So let's see what we have here. The biggest thing that they released this year was their was it the Burundi series of coffees? And it was very difficult for me to justify reviewing a ridiculous amount of Burundi coffees. Let's see here. It's an interesting one. And it's the Ivan Gutierrez Gesha. I've reviewed the Ivan Gutierrez Gesha. I think we only reviewed it from Ilsa. So I don't think I've actually had it from Passenger. I'm going to write that down because I think a lot of people would really like us to revisit Passenger as well. I'm not sure if we have a single Passenger review this entire year, actually. Howard says, "Sup, Julian? First time joining the live stream. Do you don't do say right now? They have a lot of coffees on their website right now. Are you doing the Aviary 2025 collection? We'll take a look at the Say coffees, and while we're taking a look at those, I'll discuss the Aviary collection. So it sounds it sounds nice. The Aviary review that we did was very popular, and I think there is a little bit of desire to make sure that I do get those coffees a lot of the time, but I it's always been a tricky thing to commit to subscriptions from any coffee roaster. We've never committed to any subscription. Even Airworks, we actually do single purchases from them mostly because we do like to pick and choose what we're going to be reviewing, especially if there's stuff that's suggested to us. Um, I would like to, but I'm not sure if we are going to actually do that. I think it's probably easier, even if it costs a little bit more, to try to get there right when Aviary does release those coffees and pick them out, especially if we know that it's something that's going to be interesting to us and we want to review them. Yeah, we'll take a look at these Say coffees. So we also do have a Say review coming out this week. So that is the Kenyan Gesha. So I know a lot of people are going to be looking forward to that one as well. But we'll take a look at what else they have. And it looks like a lot of pink bourbon coffees. And this is an interesting one, Honduras Quechua. And this coffee is still available on their website. And I was actually talking about this coffee with Jacob from Airworks the other day. That this is the first American coffee roaster I think we've seen that's carrying Los Chinizos. So that's interesting in itself. And then, wow, anaerobic honey processed coffee. Who would have thought that Say would ever be doing that a couple of years ago? And we have a Gesha. And so they do have some interesting sounding coffees. I don't think that there's anything too out of the box with them right now, but they're a coffee roaster that I'll certainly keep in mind here for, well, a lot of releases. I always check whenever they do release new coffees on Wednesday. Ian says Tim Wendelbo has a very good washed Pacamara from Los Pineros in El Salvador. It's a Christmas edition, also a very good coffee from Caballero in Honduras. So I think we've reviewed both of those coffees. I could have that wrong on the El Salvador, but I think we have. And the tricky thing about Tim Wendelbo is the same thing with Passenger. So what they get a lot of praise for is that they work with these producers, and as a result, they release the same coffees year after year. And I actually really admire that about both Passenger and Tim Wendelbo. But the tricky thing for us is that it means we'd be reviewing the same coffee that we've had in years past. And while it's going to be a little different, I think the reviews would be pretty similar to those as well. So it's one I'll take a very quick look at, given that Tim Wendelbo has had some slightly newer stuff on their website recently, but I'm not sure it's going to be something that we could go for. And if we do have some time by the end of the stream, we do have a bunch of really good suggestions. And I'm actually going to go through something that I saw on the Pour Over Reddit where a lot of people were discussing. I don't know why I took us there, where a lot of people were discussing. Oh, it's not actually Tim Winslow. There was a post where people were discussing their top five favorite coffee roasters in the world. If you had some extra time, I just kind of wanted to go through that because it was an interesting list. And I looked at it briefly, but I wanted to go over it a little bit more in depth. Oh yeah, there we go. There's a Christmas coffee. That's two. I'll keep that one in mind too with the Kuma coffee. And as a result, we'll have at least two options next month if we do decide to go with a holiday Christmas edition offering. Pakas right here, Chemo. Are they out of the Ethiopian coffee? Yeah, it looks like they're, and they also have a, this is their Christmas edition coffee. No, they still have this one. I really want to get this one, given that we have not reviewed it up to this point. I really wish it would have been featured in the Advent calendar this year, but that's another option we have right there. So yeah, the Caballero Gesha, when it's at its best, this is actually a very impressive coffee. So I would like to try this year's edition of it, but unfortunately, not sure that's going to happen this year. Howie says, "Wow, these are all coffees of this year." Yes, they are all coffees of this year, especially these ones that are this year's version of these coffees. So I certainly appreciate them for that. All right, and then the last suggestion we had was a washed chirroso suggestion from Burnt Turd, and that in itself is kind of interesting because have there been? Are we working on? I'm working on one washed chirroso. I've seen a lot less of those recently. I feel like for a while there were so many coffee roasters that were releasing chirrosos, but they haven't been quite as common within the last few months. So uh, not sure if anybody has any good suggestions for the Wash Chiroso. I think we have a pretty good idea and theme for this month. We have, as of right now, six coffees from six different coffee roasters. and all different origins with the exception of the Clatch and the Cabra El Salvadorian ones. So worst case scenario, we might run off. If we find two more, then we'll do two runoffs and kind of take the top two from each poll and put them in that final poll to decide which of the coffees will be our coffee of the month. But that right there takes us to all of those. And essentially, if we do have I'll put the I don't wanna put the Bean and Bean on there because I feel like if we do, it's going to automatically win because a lot of people are just going to vote for it, and as mentioned, the issue with that is that it's a little expensive, but maybe if they do have something that is on the slightly lower side of things in terms of the price range, because it's not for me, I don't mind spending that much on a coffee, but I feel like it's probably tricky for a lot of people to justify that cost, and here we go. This, Santa Felicia, is this also a 4-ounce bag? This one's 11 ounce, and this one right here is a Guatemala. You know what? There we go. And I think that there's a very strong chance that this one might still win just because it is Bean and Bean, and they seem to be a bit trendy right now. But we'll go ahead and toss this one on there as well. And that gives us 7. So if anybody has any more, then we'll go ahead and take a look at those. But yeah, it seems like we have a pretty good list for our coffees this month, and that means I'll go ahead and take a look at that pour over Reddit post. And I remember it was a very popular post, so I usually don't go through Reddit too often, but we'll see. That one was suggested to me, and I feel like it was suggested to me given just how popular it was. Does Moonraker Hydrangea have anything really interesting? As I'm looking at this, it reminds me that I have not revisited Hydrangea that much since I actually haven't reviewed a coffee from them since they switched over to the Loring. So if either of them have anything interesting, then that might be worth visiting. See what else we have on the Reddits. I know that the Reddit pour over has so many more posts than the coffee Reddit. How about Proud Mary? Does Proud Mary have anything? I feel like Proud Mary's always has some unique dishes. I guess we'll revisit that. Take a look at Proud Mary real quick. And that's a Pacamara. So there, if we were going with the Pacamara theme, then that's an option. But it actually doesn't look like they have too many higher end offerings on their website, at least. I think oh, the Pacamara Natural is a premium offering. Okay, so not too much. Let's go back to the Reddit. Okay. Local roasters doing great things. Order from Airworks. I had this coffee this morning. The El Phoenix is actually a very nice coffee. So for anybody that did get this as part of the subscription, I feel like it's going to be a very promising one. I also have this coffee from Claremento, and I feel like this coffee is much better than the Ingise Gamera that I'm trying today. So this is another one that I'm pretty interested in. I've only had one cup of it so far, but it was a pretty interesting coffee. Brandywine. You know what's been interesting is I've seen so many Brandywine posts on this Reddit when I was looking at it recently. So we'll take a look at what else they have. Goot and Co. Uh, is that Smooch Trap? So a bunch of really interesting offerings right there. I feel like Black and White might have something pretty interesting as well. Primary Deluxe has been disappointing lately. That's unfortunate. Even if you still go down to their shop, either in Portland or in Austin, then they definitely have some very interesting coffees there all the time. It's just unfortunate that maybe right now they're not as abundant as they might normally be. And then Doc's definitely got to have a holiday themed coffee. So I'm going to keep them in consideration as well for next month. So we have a couple. We have Tim Wendelbo, Kuma, Doc. So some decent options as of right now. I was curious about this coffee, the Hatchie from Chef's Table. Never heard of Chef's Table before. It says Doc on there too, so I'm wondering if they might be working together in some capacity. Coffee resting. Here's some lessons from less known roasters. Zio. I remember seeing this post. I didn't look at it, but a lot of people have discussed Zio this year. It's been probably one of the most discussed coffees I've heard that I have not had a sample of or tried. So maybe in the future. But yeah, this is the post I was discussing. What are the top 5 coffee roasters in the world right now? And it was interesting to see that this was the top pick. So Coffee Collective, Hart, Say, La Cabra, Tim Wendelbo. And Why I really liked reading this post was because it does go to show that even if I've not necessarily been the biggest fan of a coffee roaster recently, or there have been a lot of people that have been a little critical of some coffee roasters, it goes to show that a lot of people still feel this way. So Alex and Coffee said that La Cabra was one of their five favorites, and they got the most upvotes. Actually, this one did as a troll, but it did get some of the most upvotes with a lot of people that were agreeing, saying that La Cabra, Tim Wendelbo, so on are some of their favorites. Like, I think Heart was much more enjoyable a couple of years back. I think that La Cabra, they're actually a coffee roaster I've never been the biggest fan of. Say's been up and down for me recently, and Coffee Collective, kind of the same thing. Haven't had Tim Wendelbo in a bit, but it's just kind of interesting to see how many people agree with this and how much support there is. Brandywine, as mentioned, I remember seeing them a surprisingly high amount of times within this post, as a lot of people really seem to be enjoying Brandywine's coffees recently as well. Brooke has a holiday offering. So there we go. And I think I might open it up next month to a lot of people that have these holiday offerings too, because there are going to be so many coffee roasters that are offering those holiday coffees. And as a result, I feel like a lot of people usually wait for those and keep an eye out for those. And let's see what else we have. And they're just kind of talking about Heart, and they're talking about how it's changed quite a bit over the years. I know that they switched to the IMF, and they've been experimenting with roasting machines since then. But outside of that, yeah, it's a little different in the same way that Roseline's a little different. They're a coffee roaster that I haven't looked too deeply into recently. Right, Passenger, Prodigal, Tim Wendelbo, and Standout. See, for me, that's why I find it so interesting is because a lot of the philosophies and themes behind these coffee roasters are different. Like you can see that these two, as mentioned, they have very similar philosophies. And then Prodigal and Standout are a little different. I mean, Standout has so many just unique offerings. These mostly focus on washed coffees, and then Standout focuses on these experimental out there coffees. So they talk about how great the people at Passenger are. I couldn't agree anymore. Not much needs to be said about Tim Wendelbo, and Prodigal is the most consistent, which is interesting to me. I would say that the coffees I've had from them are very consistent. I haven't had anything that I've been overly impressed by. I've just found great consistencies within their coffee. Standout highlights super cool processing. So yeah, same thing with Standout. They just have those very out there coffees, and it's for some people. I haven't necessarily found one that I've loved from them, but interesting nonetheless. And then they talk about Flower Child, Hydrangea, Black and White, and Fried Hats. It's interesting to me. It's just very interesting to see the differences in a lot of these coffee roasters because I wouldn't say that these have a lot of similar characteristics to them. Fried Hats, Black and White do tend to be much more experimental, though they highlight the fact that it's not necessarily because their uh, their unique offerings are so amazing, but rather because their cleaner stuff is. And then Hydrangea, a lot of people really love Hydrangea, and it's interesting just how much praise I've seen from Hydrangea since they've made the transition, not just in mostly their roasting philosophy, their sourcing philosophy, but also the way that or the machine that they're using now. So that's why, again, I need to revisit Hydrangea here at some point in the future. A lot more I'd like to try. September, Steady State, Tim Wonderbow bots. So yeah, very different. And once again, interesting right here to see because this is probably the list that I'm most in line with. Like Wes and Gopi is one of my favorites right now. HNS, I would say, is probably one of the, if not the best American coffee roaster out there. September is doing great work. Say Hydrangea. Yeah, this is probably the one that I agree with most so far. Very good suggestions right there. Karasu, and then once again, just very different for me. Glitch, I haven't had the best experiences with. Perk, I usually hear a lot of really positive things about. So they're a coffee roaster that I think we still need to visit. It's interesting that they haven't been directly suggested to us as part of our suggestion recommendation list, but they're a coffee roaster that we'll probably need to visit. Nomad. What do we have here? I'm not entirely sure. I think Glitch roasts on the Probat because I think when I was at their shop, I saw them utilizing a Probat. But Loring, Probat, and they're working on some subtext and Doc Manhattan Flower Child. I just really wanted to run through this list mostly because of how unique a lot of the suggestions that these people have. Canadian Revolver is a multi roaster, so they're not actually roasting their own stuff right now. Rogue Waves, you can see a lot of Canadian influence. Brandywine, as mentioned, people really like Brandywine. This was one of the more appreciated posts because they kind of went into detail, and their quota is a lot of the same of what we look for: great sourcing, roasting, types of coffee that are sourced, which I would say goes along with sourcing, and then uniqueness. If you can get at least one of those in the world class category, then usually I really like to put that coffee in world class. So This is much more what I would say a lot of people feel. You have these coffee roasters that are very popular, I would say, within the smaller, more niche coffee community. So the Picky Chemist is one that a lot of people continuously highlight, a coffee roaster that we continuously go back and visit quite a bit. Hydrangea, Aviary, which we still only had one, and we're going to need to review more in the future. And then Substance. And while we're on the topic of Substance, we will be doing a Substance series. So our first Substance review should be coming out this Wednesday, and then we'll be releasing one after each following week. And then honorable mentions: Moonwake, Subtext, April. Speaking of Subtext, I kind of wanted to do that special box that they did have. So we're going to transition away from this for just 1 second. And we're going to pull up Subtext offerings because they do have that box and it's actually not too expensive. I wonder if, yeah, best of 2024 box. I just wish I knew which coffees were being featured in this because I don't want to pick up one that we've already reviewed. But it is kind of interesting, 80 grams, and it's 151 US dollars for it. And I feel like it would make for a very good either blind taste test or something along those lines. But this is something that I would really like to explore, given that we had very positive experiences with Subtext this. And then Datura, I think we should be getting some coffees from them here in the future. And let's see what else we have. And top five in no particular order, Hatch, Subtext, say. So this is a little bit more similar. And this is the first one I've seen say Colfea Circular. But it's interesting how their own preferences are a little different than mine. You have coffee roasters like Ilsa and Doc, who I have had some good coffees from, but nowhere to the same extent that I've had from other coffee roasters. Like Apollon's Gold has been in my top 10 favorite coffees, Colfea Circular, and say Subtext has even done some great job this year, a great job this year. And then I've seen a lot of people saying Manhattan, and one of the reasons why I find that to be extremely important is because I've heard negative feedback from Manhattan recently quite a bit. And it's interesting to see that a lot of people still have a lot of positivity with their coffees. So that's to say that just because maybe the community that you're working with or dealing with in general isn't the biggest fan of them, it's not to say that others aren't. And anything else worth discussing? Luminous, Brandywine, as mentioned, there's a lot of Brandywine. There's quite a bit of Prodigal and Hatch. This is an interesting one because you see Sweet Bloom still listed there by somebody as being one of their favorites, even though I would say the profile is a little different from some of the other stuff they have listed there. Tim Wendelboe. So yeah, I thought that this would be a fun and interesting list to kind of take a look at, mostly because I took a very brief glance at it and just found it interesting to see how the selection that a lot of people have as their favorite coffee roasters are just so different. Like people have a much more, I would say, diverse range of their favorite coffee roasters. For the most part, I feel like my favorite coffee roasters are kind of along the same theme. They, for the most part, do tend to be lighter. They do tend to focus a little bit more on their wash processed coffees and so on. But yeah, that's kind of that. And we just have a couple more minutes here since we've already decided our coffee. So I'm just gonna kind of take a look at some other things. If you guys have any suggestions, questions, or anything you wanted to say while we're still on stream, then go ahead and let me know. But yeah, we've pretty much wrapped this one up. Kind of take a look at their collection. I have not taken a look at their offerings too much recently. And there's the man for somebody that talks about how they navigate this website. It's interesting that did they change their website? Because I'm not saying the all ops on there anymore. There we go, all collections. Just kind of seeing if they have anything else that might catch my interest as of this moment. A lot of Colombian coffees. Are these actually new? Galo, Gesha, NX, and oh, this is an interesting one. I have not seen this before. A Here's Loma Pacamara. And I know that Cofea Circular has been working a lot with Gala Morales recently, so this is a very interesting coffee, especially if we were going to go with that Pacamara theme. So that's one I could possibly revisit. We haven't done Cofea Circular in a while, so we'll see. They also have all of these new Ethiopian coffees, and I would love to do one of their Ethiopian coffees. I might be able to justify it too, given that they are not going to be in the Cafe Box Advent calendar this year. And then some of the Kenyan coffees that we have over here, and they always seem to have a bunch of Panamanian geishas as well. For maybe something on the more obscure origins. They've had a lot of Peruvian geishas over the year. Yeah, here's some more Peruvian geishas. I do wonder, we don't have a Peruvian geisha, and while they're a little bit more common, I feel like since we didn't figure out an eighth coffee, we'll do the Peruvian geisha from Café Circular as the eighth one. And that'll kind of give us an opportunity to do a runoff because that gives us 8 total coffees. We have a bunch of different origins: El Salvador, Guatemalan, Honduran, the Kona Gesha, Costa Rica, and then a Peruvian one. So we'll see how people feel about that. Some interesting Ugandan coffees, but yeah, just a couple moments right here. So if anybody else has anything, then I'll go ahead and address that. Otherwise, I'm actually very happy with our list of coffees. Guess I can go back to taking a look at Moonwake since I was kind of curious to see what they were offering. And then Hydrangea. Oh, yeah, they're Basha Bakele. I'm kind of curious about that one. Somebody did reach out to us asking if we were going to be reviewing their Pepe, their Thai oxidator. What is this? To become a Hirata Red Couture. This is an interesting one. Moonwake does have some interesting coffees right now, and they've also switched to Loring, so they might be a coffee roaster worth visiting here in the future. And we'll also take a look at Hydrangea. I've heard a lot of people say that they now have the best Bloody Bermudas out there since people have had mixed reactions to Manhattan's Bloody Bermudas. But yeah, I don't think we've done a Salmon Bermudas review, a second one actually, so that might be worth visiting. And then El Burro. No, they have iridescence too. I think I remember seeing them releasing this coffee. And given the very positive experience we had with iridescence from H&S, it might be worth visiting this coffee. Some Discovery, a Whoosh Whoosh, honey processed. I'm really intrigued by the sourcing that Hydrangea has had since, I guess they first started. They've really picked out some interesting coffees from some, I want to say, both well-known and less well-known producers. So this one right here is another example of that. It's got a very interesting description to it as well. A Costa Rican Woot Woot. Very interesting coffee right there. I also do like their Fellow Carter mug, even if I haven't been the biggest fan of Fellow's Carter mugs in the past. Yeah, and I think we will go ahead and wrap this stream up. So I'm going to go ahead and post a runoff so that way we can have the coffees for our coffee of the month poll up by Monday. So look for that here at some point today, the runoff for the 8 coffees that we do have suggested. But I just want to say thank you everybody that did participate in this stream. As mentioned, there were some really great suggestions, so I appreciate that. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.